The ballpoint hissed across paper like a fuse, and the command logbook drank the ink with a soft, hungry scratch. Floor wax and cold coffee mixed in the corridor air at Norfolk HQ. The flag rope ticked against its pole. Tap, tap, as if keeping time with my pulse. General Stephen Harrington, retired, ribbons neat, hand steady, signed the ceremonial line, closed the pen with a click, and slid the leather-bound book toward the clerk. I didn't blink. The handwriting wasn't his. It was the Z in the loop of the D, the slant that cut the tail of the S like a keel through foam. My father's hand, Commander Richard Davis. Dead since 1991, if the Navy's tidy sentences could be believed. The page carried the smell of old paper and fresh ink. My throat carried the heat of a name you don't say out loud in this building. Lieutenant Commander Davis? The yeoman said, polite, offering me the log as witness. The leather was cool against my palms. I looked where my eyes had already gone. The signature nestled among today's routine. A port call, a sign-off, a ghost. The pen stroke tucked a tiny notch in the capital R like a secret handshake. My mother had once circled that notch with a fingernail and called it my inheritance. Across the foyer, portrait frames glinted, old faces keeping quiet. Brass vents exhaled a dry, institutional breath. Somewhere a copier chuckled and fell silent. I heard another sound deeper down, the memory salt of a hull in winter, and felt the insignia box in my jacket pocket press against my ribs. My father's old pin, the one my mother kept on a shelf that smelled like lemon oil and dust. Harrington turned, smile calibrated for photographs. His handshake was warm, his eyes a fraction too bright. Davis, and he said, always good to see the family still serving. Family. The word scratched the same way the pen had. I kept my voice level. Sir, the log needs a second witness. Of course, he said, stepping closer, a faint cologne of cedar and old files. Shall we? I initialed. The ballpoint nicked the paper, tiny tactile stutter, and my stomach dropped an inch. The clerk snapped the book shut with reverence. The sound echoed up the stairwell and died. Harrington's gaze flicked to my nameplate like he was checking a coordinate he already knew. I knew your father, he said softer. Good man. Is that his hand? I asked, before the sensible voice in my head could tow me back to shore. The question landed between us like a dropped wrench. Small, heavy, loud in the wrong room. For a heartbeat, the general's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. Left, right, like a swimmer measuring a current. You're seeing ghosts, he said, so soft the flag rope had to lean in to hear it. I'm seeing a signature, I said. His. The foyer's bulbs hummed. The flag rope tapped again, tap, tap. The yeoman coughed, paper thin, and retreated into his clipboard. Harrington's jaw slid a degree tighter. He shifted just enough to block the portraits from my peripheral vision, as if the dead might eavesdrop. Some ink looks familiar after 30 years, he said. Muscle memory of the institution. A gentler man might have put a hand on my shoulder. He didn't. Leave this page where it lies, Lieutenant Commander. Lieutenant Commander. Rank as reminder, not respect. I leaned a thumbnail against the log's gold-foiled edge and felt the burr of the paper. Real. Present. He disappeared on a classified operation, as I said. The Navy folded the flag. My mother folded the story. Harrington's breath touched winter into the inch of air between us. Your mother kept you safe, Amo, he said. So did we. He tipped his head toward the book. Friendly, final. Some signatures are better as rumor. Behind him, a junior officer pushed through the glass doors. Cold air flooded the foyer, carrying the harbor's salt and diesel. It hit the ink and thinned its smell until it was only paper again. I felt the old insignia box shift in my pocket, the lid seam a square line against fabric, and imagined another lid, wood, the one we'd shut in 91 over a flag and a man we didn't have. Sir, I said, the word a keel line to keep me from rolling, if that's not my father's, prove it. If it is, tell me why he's signing a book in 2024. Harrington looked past me to the corridor that led to records, where the lights always flickered once like a blink before settling steady. He worked his jaw, then set the smile down entirely and let his face be what it was. complicated and tired. This building teaches two languages, he said, ceremony and truth. One is loud, one you whisper. Whisper it, I said. He looked at the clerk, then at the portraits, calculating the angle of the room. Not here. The clerk pretended to shuffle forms. The flag rope tapped, tap, tap, like a metronome counting us into a song we didn't want to sing. I glanced down at the signature again. My father's name turned ship, cutting a line through official water, and felt something old and salt-stained stand up inside me. Tonight, Harrington said, voice low. My house. No aids. Bring the insignia. He didn't wait for my assent. He turned away, each step measured, each breath like a man remembering a road by feel. The glass door aside, Winter slid out after him. I slipped the logbook's weight out of my hands and back to the yeoman. Secure this, I said. He nodded, eyes wide, pen suddenly a fragile thing in his fingers. As I walked toward records, the corridor lights flickered once, blink, and steadied. The air tasted like dust and toner, like secrets and their paperwork. I touched the insignia box through my jacket, the metal's outline a cold square against heat, and thought of a different box that had carried a folded flag to our kitchen table. In 1991, my mother's hand on the seam like a vow she wasn't allowed to speak. I knew the Navy's two languages. My mother had raised me bilingual. I turned down the hall toward the archive room where truth sleeps under fluorescent lights, and I understood the page was only a door. The signature, just the first wave breaking over a hull that had waited 30 years to surface. My childhood smelled like lemon oil on a coffee table and salt from a father who didn't come home. On the mantel, his insignia box sat square and serious, brushed metal that cooled your fingertip even in July. My mother polished the wood beneath it in small ovals, never lifting the rag where the box rested, as if moving it might smudge a memory. When the afternoon sun crossed the room, it caught the bevel of that lid and turned it into a blade of light. Commander Richard Davis vanished in 1991, on a mission our block learned to call classified, because adults mouthed it like a prayer they didn't want kids to overhear. One morning, there was coffee and oatmeal and the tick of the kitchen clock. That night, there was a folded flag that smelled faintly of starch and rain, and a captain who couldn't look me in the eye. My mother signed 3 papers with a pen that scratched louder than grief. She kept the documents in a drawer with the spare keys and said nothing that wasn't practical. Silence turned out to be an heirloom, too. She taught me the Navy's 2 languages before I wore the uniform. Ceremony lived on the walls, portraits, plaques, a photograph of my father in dress whites, cap under his arm, the shadow of a boat hull behind him like a promise. Truth lived in the kitchen, hands around a mug, the kettle's thin whistle, the careful deployment of words. Names can save or sink, she'd say, eyes on the window. Know when to use yours. At 8, I traced my father's signature on the back of an old postcard until the loops felt like mine, R that hooked a touch left, S that crossed itself in a hurry like a ship's wake closing. At 12, I learned to stand still when a flag went by and keep my face arranged the way my mother's did when officers visited with casseroles and half-stories. At 16, I borrowed a friend's skiff and took it into the harbor alone. The outboard chattered under my palms. Diesel rode the wind. Gulls heckled like old chiefs. The water widened, and I could hear a frequency nobody else claimed. A boat is a signature in motion if you're paying attention. My father had written his name in wakes I couldn't see. When I swore my oath, the recruiter's office smelled like toner and stale candy. I signed Morgan Davis in a hand that wasn't his, then tucked the memory of that other hand somewhere it could anchor without dragging. In training, I learned the Navy's appetites: order, speed, silence, and the grammar of a deck that tells you when you're wrong by pitching. Bulkheads answer back, engines complain. Paper lies unless someone brave writes on it. Norfolk HQ became my weather. Floor wax in the morning, kettle steam in the afternoon, late-night copy or heat when a report insisted on being perfect. I learned which corridors shivered in winter and which offices held on to summer like a bad habit. I learned the way the building swallows certain names. Say budget and doors open. Say whistle and the air handlers sound louder. My mother visited once, paused under a line of portraits, and pressed her thumb into the seam of the insignia box I'd smuggled onto my shelf. Hold your line, she said, barely moving her lips. Nobody ever told me what happened in 91. But absence has textures. You feel them when you stand inspection, and the corner of a discharge paper cuts your palm with a memory you didn't have. You smell them when a storm blows diesel and brine up the Elizabeth River, and something in your throat remembers a name spoken into wind. I wore his shadow lightly most days. Then a night shift would fold wrong, and I'd wake at 0300 tasting metal. Sure, I'd heard his boot step in the hallway just then. Gone. Off hours, I ran by the water until the cold made my lungs decent. On a rust-scabbed pier near Lambert's Point, an old tug captain kept a thermos and advice. He smelled like salt and coffee grounds. Boats don't lie, he'd say, knocking his knuckle on the rail. Men do, paper does. Boats'll tell you where they've been. I believed him without ceremony. The traditions that bind us, hats, hymns, bells, kept me upright, even when they also kept me quiet. You learn how to salute grief until it stands at ease. You learn, too, how to inventory yourself without a corpsman. Pulse steady, breath even, bearing belongs to you. I wore my father's insignia tucked in a pocket at promotions. Superstition, maybe. Or navigation. Years ran smooth on the surface. Underneath, the harbor we call institution shifted its sand. Contractors came to briefings with polished slides and practiced humility. Procurement spoke a dialect heavy on numbers and light on consequence. I watched signatures accumulate in margins, the kind that spend money with no fingerprints and call it efficiency. The day before Harrington's pen cut the page, I sat with my mother over tea that smelled like lemons and old books. She traced the rim of her cup, not looking up. If you ever meet a truth that won't sit, she said, don't force it, invite it, and don't come home with half a story. She pressed the insignia box into my hand with that same square seriousness I'd known since I was tall enough to reach the mantel. For your pocket, she added. A tool, not a relic. So when the ballpoint hissed across the logbook and wrote a loop I could have picked blindfolded, it didn't feel like magic. It felt like a radio catching signal after years of static, a frequency I'd tuned for and given up on hearing. The building's breath changed. The portraits watched. My mother's quiet training rose like a tide. Harrington's eyes had that old salt glaze when he told me to leave the page be. A man who knows current stands that way when he's deciding whether to tell a junior officer the shape of the reef. He said, not here, and bring the insignia, and the flag rope tapped, tap, tap, agreeing with the half-truth the foyer could stomach. I signed out of the watch and stepped into a corridor that smelled like dust and resolve. Records blinked once, then steadied. Ink dried. Somewhere, a hull knocked softly against wood pilings. Two slow thuds like a heartbeat underwater. I carried my father's box in my pocket and my mother's sentence in my mouth. By sundown, I was parked outside Harrington's brick colonial with the insignia cold in my palm and the question burning, if the Navy had borrowed my father's hand, what else had it kept of him? Harrington's house smelled like cedar polish and withheld stories. The brass knocker was cold against my knuckles. The door opened before I could knock twice. He wore a wool cardigan like armor and waved me in with a two-fingered permission that used to send lieutenants scurrying. No aids, he said. Phone's here. A porcelain bowl waited on a side table. My screen went dark with a small, guilty sigh. The house exhaled quiet. In the living room, a shipping bottle sat on the mantel, frigate frozen mid-tack, sails glass still. Signature, boat, insignia. The room had arranged my motifs without asking me. Tea, he offered. Truth, I said. He winced, not at the word, but at my father's inflection in my mouth. Some signatures shouldn't exist, he said at last, voice down into the old register that rooms like this were built to hold. He gestured to a leather folder on the coffee table. And some do because paper refuses to forget. I set the insignia box on the table between us. The metal clicked softly on wood. Its cool weight steadied my palm. Is that his hand in the logbook? He looked at the box instead of me. Yes. For a heartbeat, the house leaned. The shipping bottle seemed to lift a fraction, as if a tide had risen inside the glass. Heat crawled up my neck and settled there, contained. How? I asked. Badly, he said, forced dry humor. Then he folded. Your father's signature shouldn't be anywhere near 2024, but it is, because some of us kept it alive when the Navy tried to bury more than a man. He opened the folder. Paper rasped, a sound I couldn't not trust. Inside, photocopies, redacted blocks, a memo header with a date I knew by muscle memory, autumn 1991. Internal review, Harrington said. Procurement, Vexton Systems. Your father found invoices that walked like ghosts, parts billed twice, parts that never arrived, projects with more signatures than bolts. Corruption isn't loud, it whispers. The pages smelled faintly of toner and a hint of mildew, like they'd slept somewhere the sun couldn't find. He went to his CO, Harrington continued. Then to me. We started a sealed inquiry. Half the building smelled the weather change. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Then the threat started, accidents with intent. From Vexton? I asked. From men who owed Vexton favors, he said. And from a few wearing our own pins. He slid another page forward, an incident report I'd never seen. Your father's disappearance wasn't a mission loss, he said. It was a choice. We made him vanish to keep you and your mother breathing while we chased the rot. His voice frayed at the end, a cable under strain. We faked what the Navy filed. The folded flag, I said. It wasn't a question. The metal of the insignia box cooled my fingertips like a check I didn't want to cash. The funeral. Ceremony, he said. We needed procurement to relax. We needed you out of the blast radius. And you never told us, I said. My throat had gravel in it. We thought we would, he said. Then people got old, or bought, or dead. Penalties drifted. Your father stayed gone because coming back too soon would have turned you into leverage. The ship and bottle caught lamplight. A rigging thread threw a thin shadow across the glass like a hairline crack. I looked at it until my voice found a steady deck. Why now? Why let his hand surface? Because you were about to stumble into it anyway, he said. And because Vexton's shadow just showed up in a current audit with a new name and the same appetite. He tapped a manila envelope tucked under the leather folder. He left you this. My name was on the flap in a hand I knew better than my own. M-O-R-G-A-N, each letter a keel mark. The paper was old but not fragile. The glue gave with a whisper. Inside, a single-page letter and a small, brittle Polaroid of a dock at dusk. The handwriting was neat, unpanicked. If you found this, the tide finally turned. Wilmington. Slip sea boat. Honor Crest. Wait for last light, then knock twice. Dad. The word dad put a burn under my breastbone. Honor Crest. Boat. The universe has jokes. I turned the Polaroid to the lamplight. The photo smelled like old chemistry and salt. In the corner, a date. 2 summers after he died. The pier number matched his note. Slip C. Harrington watched me read and reread, like a man who has waited 30 years to see if a bridge will hold. He trusted you'd read the room, he said. Why didn't he send this sooner? We tried, Harrington said, eyes gone far. Mail lost, accounts shuttered. The one time he got close, Barrett sniffed it and tightened the leash. Rear Admiral Charles Barrett, I said, the name sour. Procurement's current head. The man who treated contracts like weather and ethics like folklore. He was a captain then, Harrington said. Ambitious, careful. He learned the old scam's angles and swapped the names. Vexton became Tri-Coast. Tri-Coast became whatever it is this quarter. He pushed a flash drive across the table with 2 fingers. Black plastic, cheap, dangerous. Records, enough to start a fire without burning the right people alive. I didn't touch it. You're asking me to light it. I'm asking you to choose how, he said. Ceremony or truth, or both. The porch took a gust. The front door's weather strip hissed. I could smell the river, faint and metallic, reaching us even here. The ship and bottle sat still, but I swear I felt a lift under my feet. A boat that hadn't left the cradle unmooring in my chest. If he's alive, I said, I go to Wilmington. You go to Wilmington, he echoed. You take that insignia. He'll need proof the Navy isn't the only thing knocking. I slid the letter into my jacket. The paper rasped against the insignia box. Signature brushing metal, old father, new daughter, 2 languages making one sentence. I palmed the flash drive last. It felt warmer than the room, as if friction had made truth feverish. Harrington stood, joints clicking like an old ship settling at anchor. I was wrong to let silence do the work, he said. Don't repeat my mistake. At the door, he paused. Barrett won't like this. Barrett doesn't have to. He has friends who do. He nodded once, a final, tired salute. Bring your father home, Davis, and bring the room to attention while you do it. The night hit cold and wet. I breathed diesel and river and one thin strand of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. In the dark windshield, my face looked like my mother's when she made tea and refused to cry. I set the envelope on the passenger seat. The Polaroid lay on top, dock lights bruised into the emulsion like stars you could touch. I started the car. The engine coughed once, then held. The insignia box pressed square through my jacket into my ribs, a compass I could carry in bone. I pulled into the Norfolk night with a father's handwriting in my pocket and a boat's name in my mouth. And I understood. The next page wouldn't turn itself. I would turn it, and the water would answer. Records smelled like toner and old dust, that dry, papery air that turns breath into caution. The archive clerk slid a cart toward me, gray tubs labeled year-month, rubber wheels whispering over linoleum. I signed the log, my pen scratched faint against the hum of the vent, and felt the insignia box press its square against my ribs like a reminder to keep my back straight. I started with 1990-1992 procurement, fingers cold on manila, paper rasped, redactions glared, names hid under black bars like fish under ice. Vexton systems appeared in a polite font again and again, unit price variations that didn't add up, delivery dates that kissed the same Tuesday twice. In the margins, a familiar slash of ink corrected a line item, then underlined it once. My father's hand, not his signature, his temper tucked into a stroke. Petty Officer Ruiz killed the sound of her chewing when she saw my stack. She'd been in these cages since before my commission. She knew where bodies and budget both were buried. Her perfume was laundry soap and pencil shavings. You fishing? She asked. Whistle fishing, I said. She rolled her chair close. The casters chirped. You won't like the catch. She pointed with a bitten nail at a routing slip. Vexton routed through a Shell LLC, inked approval stamped by an assistant's assistant. In the corner, a note, per CB. Initials like a rubber stamp on a throat. Charles Barrett? I asked. Ruiz's mouth tightened. He was an admiral then, learned quick. I flipped one more folder. An audit memo, slim and nervous, mentioned internal review pressure and loss of subject. Subject. As if my father were a misplaced box. Anything on disappearance? I said. Ruiz shook her head. Paper says weather. Men say accident. Tide says neither. She tapped her temple. I remember a captain who stopped using the elevator for a while. Said the cable sounded like a threat. I slid the manila envelope Harrington had given me closer in my bag with my knee like a talisman not yet ready for daylight. Honor Crest, Wilmington. My father's letters used to smell like diesel and coffee. This one had the clean, old paper scent of patience. A cart rattled past. A metal bookend clanged. The sound made Ruiz flinch. You heard from your mother? She asked. Soon, I said. After I open the door that needs opening. She nodded, then leaned in. Watch your back on procurement floor, hot, she murmured. Carpet's soft, knives aren't. I printed what I could without waking the system alerting itself. Warm paper slid under my palm, toner smell sharp enough to sting. In the quiet chime of the copier, my phone lit, restricted number. I let it ring twice before I stepped into the hallway where the air tasted like cold ductwork. Davis, I said. A beat. Office white noise on the other end, keyboard taps, a distant laugh cut too short, then a voice I knew from briefings and budgets. Smooth, tempered, predatory. You're turning rocks, Rear Admiral Barrett said. Careful, things live under them. Things like invoices, I said, or ghosts. Old rumor, he said. Bad for morale. Truth's better, I said, even when it smells. He exhaled through nose like a diver who didn't trust the water. You'll hurt good people chasing dead ones. My father wasn't dead, I said. Silence. Then, mind your lane, Lieutenant Commander. Procurement is my lane, I said. Today. Not this procurement, he said. Sign off and walk away. His lines were short enough to cut. I kept mine shorter. No. A click. Empty line. The duct hummed a neutral tone, indifferent to rank. Back in the stacks, I scanned until the numbers blurred. Vexton begat Tricoast begat a third alias I'd seen on a recent slide deck. Mason Harbor Logistics. Clean font, patriotic logo, losses explained by global volatility. I ran the flash drive Harrington had pushed across his table into a terminal that still ran an operating system with square corners. Folders bloomed. Emails, delivery photos with mismatched timestamps, a scanned memo with Barrett's name in the CC line, and a note. Handle. Don't escalate. I printed 10 pages, then 6 more, then forced myself to stop. Paperweight isn't proof if you drown the decision maker under it. I slipped the stack into a binder, the plastic warm from friction. The binder's spine pressed a red line into my palm. Harrington's text arrived, Barrett sniffing, move quick. Move? Wilmington tonight. I wrote back. En route. On the way out, I passed the Hall of Honor. Quiet, waxed floor, glass cases breathing faint circles onto panes, names lined brass. Some had dates that whispered too soon, some had none. Ceremony, truth. My mother's 2 languages took turns translating me as I stood there, a daughter squared off against a system that taught her to salute. I called her from the parking lot. The wind carried river cold and the smell of machine room grease. She picked up on the second ring. Morgan? I found his hand, I said. I heard the kettle being set on the stove, not by sound, by rhythm. 3 steps, lift, set. Alive? She asked. Maybe, Art, I said. Wilmington, tonight. She breathed in, the line crackled faintly. Take the pin, she said. Not on your jacket, in your palm. I have it, I said. The metal warmed under my fingers, even in the wind, like it could take a temperature and diagnose a life. Don't come home with half a story, she said. And don't let that man, Barrett, write your ending. He tried, I said. He's bad at handwriting. She laughed once, a sound I hadn't heard since I was 12, and brought her a bent nail I'd hammered straight. Be faster than fear, she said. Copy. I killed the call. The sky over the river bruised toward dusk, a purpling that makes floodlights look honest. I drove south with the heater fighting night, the wipers shushing once to clear salt grit from oncoming spray. The envelope rode shotgun, Polaroid on top. Dock lights bled in its white chemistry like a promise trying to keep itself. Halfway down 17, my rear view filled with a black SUV long enough to ask a question. It sat there, too close, then hanging back. My ribs felt the old training kick. Don't brake. Don't race. Be dull. I took the next exit for gas that smelled like varnish and hot tar and watched the SUV continue, tail lights, twin red eyes shrinking to nothing. Mini turn, not the last. At a rest stop, I opened Harrington's flash drive directory again on my laptop. A folder marked VCX letters held 3 PDFs, whistle memos signed with only initials, a threat letter typed once and photocopied so often the toner looked like soot. One line stuck. Sign or your family signs a different paper. I closed the lid, the hinge thumping like a heartbeat under wood. Wilmington's harbor gave me diesel and tide and gull cry. The marina office light buzzed with a bug orbiting itself to death. I parked where the Polaroid framed the world correctly. Slip C, third finger pier, a lamp out at the far end, making the dark look like a mouth. The water slapped pilings with a damp, patient sound. Rope creaked in cleats. I smelled creosote and river and the metallic breath of night. Honor Crest sat where the photo said she would. 30 feet of kept-up hull, name in white block on blue, a cabin light off, a shape that understood waiting. The boat's rub rail kissed the dock with small, soft knocks, a conversation that had never needed witnesses. I tucked the insignia into my palm the way my mother had told me. The metal a cool square that made my hand feel like a compass. I walked the planks. The wood flexed and answered. My boots thudded in a rhythm I recognized from ships that don't lie. At the transom, a throw ring hung like a halo. The rope smelled like wet cotton. I put my hand on the gunwale and felt the give. Alive, not museum. A shadow moved behind the cabin curtain, then stilled. My mouth went dry the way it does before you key a net and risk the whole deck hearing you. I lifted my hand and knocked twice, wood on wood, dull, exact, then closed my fingers around the insignia until the metal pressed it square into my skin. From inside, a breath. Floorboards creaked. A latch lifted with a sound I dreamed wrong 1,000 times. "Who's there?" a voice called, roughened, careful, low. "Morgan Davis," I said. "Your daughter." Silence held. Then the cabin light flicked on, yellow and honest. The door cracked. An eye the same tired blue as mine looked through, searching a face that had only ever lived in a frame. The lock slid back fully. A man stood in the doorway, thinner, older, alive. "Kiddo," he said. I didn't move, not yet. The boat moved for both of us, rocking once like a nod from the water to the truth, and I understood my next words had to weigh as much as 30 years of silence. Diesel and river breath met me in the doorway. Warm cabin light flattened my shadow across the deck. I didn't step aboard until he lifted 2 fingers. Permission, old habit. The boat rocked once, a quiet greeting. My palm still held the insignia. The metal had warmed, square printing into skin like a stamp I was finally ready to show. He looked like a map redrawn by weather. Leaner, lines deeper, eyes the same blue as a winter channel. Beard close, hair gone iron at the temples. He wore a knit watch cap and a flannel that smelled faintly of salt and coffee. When he spoke, the voice turned 30 years into a seam you could run your thumb along. "Prove you're not the Navy," he said. I lifted the insignia so he could see the nick on its lower edge. Our house's clumsy hammer had made that when I was 10. "You told me to keep the nick," I said. "Said real things carry scars." He exhaled, the kind of breath that turns the boat half an inch underfoot. "Get in here," he said softer. The cabin was compact, clean, charts rolled in a tube, a kettle on a gimbaled stove, a short bunk with a navy wool blanket folded square. The port window wore salt freckles. He shut the door. The latch clicked, honest as a compass. Close like that, I saw the seam above his brow where time had tugged too hard. He didn't reach for me. He reached for the insignia and stopped an inch short. "May I?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and put it in his hand. The metal looked right there like it remembered its first grip. He closed his fingers, then put it back in mine. "Hold your own line," he said. "Why didn't you write?" I asked. "I did," he said. "The letters kept learning to drown." He poured tea and forgot about it. The kettle sighed while he leaned both palms on the table, knuckles white. A man who'd braced through weather and learned furniture can be rigging. "Vexton," he said, the consonants burned. "Parts billed twice. Parts never shipped. The signers were careful, the money wasn't." "Names?" I asked. He didn't sit. "Barrett Early, others who learned his handwriting. The inquiry spooked them. A brake line cut on base housing. A dog that didn't bark, your mother's taillight smashed twice in a week." He looked up. "We pretended it was kids, it wasn't." "Why fake a funeral?" I said. "You and your mother needed to be boring," he said. Barrett relaxed when grief behaved. His mouth pulled into something like a smile and refused. Harrington hated it. He did the ugly paperwork anyway. "You hid 30 years," I said. Saying it made the boat tilt. "I hid you," he said. "I learned boats. I wrote to a post office box that moved when Harrington moved it. Sometimes a note arrived. Sometimes a man in a suit looked at me in a grocery store long enough to make me change towns." He lifted a small tin from a shelf and set it on the table. Inside, old SIM cards, folded scraps with dates, a Polaroid twin to mine. I kept the rope coiled. "You signed the logbook," I said. "Yearly," he said. "A joke for the living. And a test?" He held my eye. "If you saw it, you were ready." I felt heat build behind my ribs, not anger, pressure equalizing. "I'm ready," I said. He nodded once. The kettle clicked off. He didn't pour. Vexton changed skins, he said. Tri-Coast, then Mason Harbor. Same invoices, new logos. Barrett learned to bless them without smudging a finger. I have records, I said. Harrington's flash drive. Emails, routing slips, enough to open doors. You'll open cages too, he said. And a cornered thing bites. I called Barrett's bluff, I said. He laughed once, short. Men like Barrett don't bluff, they delay. The boat shifted. Wake from a passing tow, the hull answering in a low, resonant knock. We both looked at the port. A patrol skiff idled at the end of the pier. Two silhouettes, a beam of light pretending to search for nothing. The mini-turn arrived in a bright sweep across our window. He moved to the switch and killed the cabin light. We breathed in the dark. The beam passed. The skiff burbled away, diesel trailing like a thought that didn't finish. You were followed? He asked. Maybe, I said. I shook one SUV at a gas stop. Could be coincidence. Institution doesn't do coincidence, he said. It does timing. He turned the light back on, low. The boat felt closer, safer, the kind of closeness you earn by keeping still. He pulled a small waterproof envelope from under the chart table and slid it to me. Inside, a folded sheet on legal letterhead. 1991 internal memo with redactions that left the bones readable, and two names written in his hand below. Barrett, C. Art Vexton liaison, Mark Ellery, a second slip held numbers, bank, shell, offshore. Paper that hurts, he said, not just paper that complains. You kept this 30 years, I said. I kept it for you, he said. So you could use it when your name could hold it. My name, I said, tasting how it fit in this cabin. It can. He finally sat, as if we'd cleared some current neither of us could see. The blanket on the bunk whispered. He looked at my face the way men look at charts after the storm, counting what stayed, what moved. Your mother, he said. She kept me bilingual, I said. Ceremony. Truth. He smiled then, full, brief, smartest officer I ever served with. She said not to bring her half a story, I said. Then bring her this, he said. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a photo I'd never seen. My parents on a pier, her hair in a scarf, his cap at an angle, my infant hand a pale starfish on his collar. The paper had softened at the corners. The salt smell had become part of it. I took it like a medal. What do you want? I asked. Not revenge, he said. Revenge eats time. I want the procurement machine to say our names out loud without choking. I want the young officers to see how to refuse a signature. I want Barrett's desk emptied the right way. The Hall of Honor, I said. I can restore your citation. I can open an internal audit. I can sit Barrett under lights he can't dim. That's a lot of I can, he said. I will, I said. He nodded, conviction recognizing itself. Then hear mine. He reached across the table. His hand swallowed mine the way it used to when I was small and crossing docks. I chose silence thinking it would die with the danger. It didn't. Don't inherit my mistake. Speak. Cleanly. I will, I said again, and it felt like an oath that knew what it cost. We heard the dock creak, a fisherman hurrying past, boots hollow on planks. The boat rocked. Tea in the cups we hadn't poured drew a steady circle. He looked past my shoulder, eyes going to a point that used to be horizon. I missed your first salute, he said, voice thinning. You'll see the next one, I said. Public. He sat back. You know what Barrett will try. He called, I said. He told me to mind my lane. And I widened it. Good, he said, and the word settled in the cabin like a weight finally put down where it belongs. I slipped the envelope and the slips into my jacket. Paper rasped against the insignia. Metal answered with a quiet tap. Signature, boat, insignia. The motifs lined up on the table like tools laid out for a repair you're finally ready to make. He stood. So did I. We didn't hug like movies. We stood like sailors who knew that touching the bulkhead meant more. He put his palm flat to the cabin wall. I matched it opposite. Wood transmitted heat one to the other. A silent check, a circuit closed. When you go, he said, do it quick. Don't take the highway. Don't keep the same tail twice. Copy, I said. He opened the door. Night air lifted the cabin curtains. River smell moved through, brackish, metallic, alive. He walked me to the transom, boots making the dock answer. At the ladder, he stopped. Tell Harrington I kept his word, he said. I will. And tell your mother. He didn't finish. The boat rocked once. The dock answered. He settled on, tell her I remembered the lemon oil. The laugh that escaped me surprised both of us. She'll like that, I said. I stepped onto the dock. He stayed where he was, a figure cut from light and tide, half in, half out of the life he'd built to keep us alive. I lifted the insignia. He lifted 2 fingers. The old permission worked both ways now. Kiddo, he said again, a benediction. Dad, I answered, the word fitting at last. I walked back down the planks, counting each thud as if it could keep my heart from running ahead. At the marina gate, I looked back. Honor Crest sat easy on her lines. The cabin light held. The river forgot us and kept moving. In the car, I spread the slips on the passenger seat. Names, numbers, letterhead that had refused to die. The flash drive waited like a loaded fuse. I set my hand over them all until the paper warmed and my palm stopped shaking. Then I turned the key. He had escaped the darkness so I could live by the light. Now the light needed to be pointed, public, and steady enough to make the room stand. I hit Harrington's porch before midnight. The cedar smell met me first. The house lights were low, the kind that make truth easier on the eyes. He opened the door without the chain. Well, he asked. He's alive, I said. And ready. Relief softened his mouth, then discipline pulled it straight. At the dining table, I spread the slips. Names, numbers, letterhead that refused to die. The flash drive thumped once on wood, a small, loaded sound. Harrington's lamp hummed. Outside, a branch scratched the window like a pen testing ink. Ellery, he said, reading. And Barrett, this triangulates. We move now, I said. Internal audit, secure chain. He nodded. I'll open the cavity, you feed it. He slid a fresh drive toward me, sterile, sealed. For IG eyes only. We built a packet. Emails, routed invoices, the memo with handle. Don't escalate. My fingers worked faster than sleep would allow. Toner smell lifted off the printer in warm waves. We stamped digital time, then paper time, then sealed it with a strip of blue evidence tape that hissed when it kissed cardboard. Ceremony. Truth. Both languages signed. My phone buzzed. Unknown. I put it on speaker. Barrett's voice came flat, tinny. You're playing with matches. Records don't burn, I said. They do in wind. I kept my lines short. See you in the hall. He left a silence behind him, then the soft click of a man who owns too many doors. Harrington raised an eyebrow. He'll show, he said. He loves stages. We filed the IG packet in a vault that breathed cold metal and freon. The lock engaged with a deep, satisfying clunk, the sound of a door deciding to be loyal. On the way out, we passed the Hall of Honor. Wax carried a faint lemon tang. Brass plates breathed softly under HVAC. I touched the seam of my pocket. The insignia pressed square against my palm, anchor and compass. Tomorrow, Harrington said, we restore the citation. We invite cameras. And recruits, I said. They deserve the lesson. Morning found me in blues that fit like a sentence finished. The hall buzzed with restrained voices. The flag's fringe barely trembled in the conditioned air. My mother stood near the front, lipstick precise, eyes steady, hands clasped around a program she hadn't opened. She smelled like her old lemon oil, faint and stubborn. You have him? She asked. I do, I said. Good, she answered, and squeezed my hand once. Hard, exact. Barrett arrived on time, posture perfect, aftershave like cold mint over iron. He looked at the covered plaque as if it owed him rent. Careful, Lieutenant Commander, he murmured, smile tight. Heroes complicate budgets. Fraud complicates lives, I said. His eyes cooled. Tread lightly. I brought cleats, I said. He blinked, the first crack in a face built for boards. A pair of captains I didn't know stood off to the side, whispering over a phone screen. I recognized the logo, Mason Harbor Logistics, shrunk to a corner in a PDF. One looked up, met my gaze, and flushed. Small tells. Soft knives. Harrington took the podium. Wood amplified the little scrape of his note card. "We are here," he said, voice steady, "to restore what paper mislaid." He pulled the cloth. Brass shone. Commander Richard Davis. Citation restored. The letters threw light like water. A murmur moved through the room, then tightened as Barrett stepped forward, smile practiced. "Institutional correction, logbook," he said to the cameras. "We take them seriously." "Correct," I said, into a mic that felt warm under my fingers. "And completely." I held up the IG receipt envelope, sealed, blue-taped. "An internal audit is open." Barrett's smile didn't move. His left hand found his cuff. "On what grounds?" "Yours," I said. A mini-turn. The doors at the back parted. 2 IG officers entered, badges visible, faces impolite. They took positions as if rehearsed. Paper had learned to walk. The captains with the phone looked suddenly interested in their shoes. Harrington nodded to me, then to the case on the plinth. Inside, my father's original citation lay under glass, crisp, unambiguous. The room had that quiet heat of a story turning into record before everyone's eyes. Barrett leaned closer, voice down. "This is a mistake." "Your mistake," I said. He tried for the old cut. "Mind your lane." "I own this lane," I said. "Now step off." My mother moved to the plaque, laid her palm on brass, then withdrew it. "Ceremony meeting truth, touch meeting sentence." "He remembered the lemon oil," I whispered. She smiled without moving her mouth. "Good," she said. Cameras clicked, insect pop, heat across lashes. Harrington's phone buzzed. He glanced, then passed it to me. A single-line message from an unlisted number. "Tell the truth, but let it heal." I knew the cadence. My father used to write like that, orders with mercy built in. "Where is he?" my mother asked low. "Safe," I said. "Soon." Barrett tried the crowd. "We honor service," he announced, oily, efficiently. I took the podium. The microphone hummed like a patient engine. "Efficiency without honor is theft," I said. "We're done with that." I didn't elaborate. Rooms remember clean lines. The IG officers stepped to Barrett. "Sir, we'll need your device." His jaw set. "On whose authority?" "Inspector General," the taller one said. "And the paper trail." Barrett's eyes flicked to me, then to Harrington, then to the cameras. He handed the phone over like a man surrendering a tool he thought he'd built alone. "I'll fight this," he said. "Finally," I said. "A fair fight." He turned away, face smoothed, shoulders locked. Procurement staff drifted toward the exit, suddenly late for meetings that didn't exist. Recruits in the back row leaned forward, wide-eyed, listening. Harrington cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Commander Davis will read the restored citation." I did. My father's name fit in my mouth without shaking. As I spoke, I saw signatures in my head. His on a page, mine under it, Barrett's over too many lines, and the boat's name stenciled sharp. Honor Crest. 3 coordinates finally agreeing. When the reading ended, we didn't clap. Not yet. Rooms deserve a beat to absorb their new shape. I looked at my mother. She nodded once. I breathed salt I couldn't smell and paper I could. "Stand by," Harrington said, lifting a hand. Not order, invitation. The recruits stood first, nervous, then certain. One by one, the room followed. Stand building from the back to the front, the sound of fabric and feet and decision rising like a tide against brass. Barrett remained seated a beat too long, then stood because isolation has a temperature and he felt the cold. I stepped back from the podium and felt the insignia in my pocket answer the warmth of my palm. The hall held its breath on that crest of silence, waiting for the last piece, his presence or his words. And I knew what had to land next to make the room stay changed when we left it. The hall held its breath, wax, brass, and that faint lemon my mother never abandoned, then exhaled into applause that sounded like surf on a calm day. Recruits stood straighter. Veterans nodded to no one and everyone. Cameras lowered, for once late to the real moment. I stepped back to the plaque. My palm met cool brass. Heat rose through skin until the letters felt alive. I laid the insignia against the corner, metal on metal, a quiet kiss, and spoke to the room without the mic. He escaped the darkness so I could live by the light. The stand tightened. Then the room chose silence. Silence that wasn't empty, but full. It held, then released, and people sat carefully, as if not to wrinkle what we'd set straight. Outside, wind off the Elizabeth carried diesel and cold sun. My phone buzzed. Upload complete. The restored citation lived on the Navy site now. Text crisp, signature line unredacted. A second buzz. The same anonymous note Harrington had shown me, this time to me alone. Tell the truth, but let it heal. My mother touched my sleeve. Her gloves were warm wool. Her eyes were dry and brighter for it. He always said, light takes work, she murmured. He remembered the lemon oil, I said. She smiled with her mouth shut, the way she smiles when victory would rather be useful than loud. Down the steps and around the corner, out of camera range, a familiar wool cap waited by the service gate. He stayed in shadow, cast clean by noon sun on brick. I didn't hurry. The ground vibrated faintly under boots and flagpole rope tick. Tap. Tapped like a metronome, keeping Honor in time. We didn't touch it first. We inventoried each other with our eyes. He looked past me to the hall doors and tipped 2 fingers, the smallest salute he could spend without attracting a crowd. That your upload? He asked, voice warm and rough as deckwood. Signed, I said. Properly. He nodded toward my pocket. You still carrying the pin? Every step, I said, and pressed it into his palm just long enough for the square to print into his skin. He pressed it back, the pressure exact. A circuit closed. Footsteps rounded the corner. 2 recruits, chatter quick, eyes bright. They didn't recognize him. They recognized the pose. People aligned by a story that finally told itself. One kid caught my gaze and straightened by instinct. The other followed a beat later, grinning like he'd learned a password. We let them pass, carrying our correction forward without knowing it. Barrett? He asked. Pinned to the board, I said. IG has his phone. Paper has his name. Good, he said. Let the tide take the rest. We walked the long way to the lot, the wind cutting honest against our cheeks. He smelled like river and the tea he'd forgotten to pour. I told him about the recruit standing first, my mother's hand on brass, Harrington's face finding peace without asking permission. He told me about a quiet morning on the Honor Crest when gulls gave up arguing and the water laid flat as a blank page. We made future plans without saying the word future. We decided the boat would come up to Norfolk when the season turned. We decided the hall would not be the last room that learned to listen. That night at home, the cursor blinked on my screen like a patient radio. I posted the citation and the audit memo with captions plain enough to travel, careful enough to land. In the comments, veterans corrected dates, kids asked what a routing slip was, and one anonymous account wrote, "We almost lost him. Thank you for not losing the story." I placed the insignia back in its box, the lid cool under my fingers, the seam catching a line of lamplight. On my desk, the Polaroid from Wilmington breathed its old chemical salt. Signature, boat, insignia. 3 fixed stars I could navigate by now without lying to myself. My mother called before bed. I could hear the kettle's tiny whistle and the clock's soft tick. Sleep, she said. I will, I said. After one more sentence. Make it clean, she said. I learned from you, I answered. I turned off the lamp. The room held a thin, good dark. Outside, the flag rope tapped, tap, tap, steady as a heart finally choosing its own pace. I lay back and let daylight's work keep watch. Truth doesn't expire. Honor waits for the right hands.